Have you ever heard of Albert Fish? A man who, with a calm demeanor and kind behavior, was secretly one of the most disturbed and horrifying serial killers of the 20th century. This story not only takes you deep into the darkness of a killer's mind, but also shows how society and family can contribute to the creation of a monster. Stay with us as we explore his life, from childhood to his execution. Albert Fish, whose full name was Hamilton Howard Fish, was born on May 19, 1870 in Washington, D.C. He grew up in a family plagued by mental and financial issues. His father, an aging drifter, passed away at the age of 75, forcing his mother to send Albert to an orphanage. There, he not only endured physical abuse, but also realized for the first time that he derived pleasure from pain. This period marked the beginning of his psychological disturbances.
When my dad died, my mom left me at the orphanage. At first, I was really scared. I thought no one would love me anymore, but good things happen here too. Now I feel better.
During his teenage years, Albert received little formal education due to poverty. He worked various menial jobs and eventually took up house painting. At the age of 20, his mother arranged a marriage for him, and he later fathered 6 children. However, his life as a father was merely a cover for the dark and hidden thoughts that plagued his mind. His strange behaviors, such as enjoying self-harm and displaying sadistic tendencies towards his children, gradually became apparent. In the summer of 1924, Albert Fish roamed the quiet countryside of New York, searching for his next victim. Behind his frail and harmless appearance lurked a darkness so deep that few could imagine. One fateful day, he stumbled upon a peaceful family farm where a 10-year-old girl named Beatrice Keel lived with her parents. Fish, with his eerie charm and soft-spoken nature, introduced himself to the Keel family, claiming to be a wandering laborer looking for work. He offered to help around the farm in exchange for food and shelter. The Keels, unsuspecting of the predator in their midst, welcomed him with kindness. Little did they know their generosity was feeding the twisted desires of a monster. Albert Fish spent his days observing Beatrice, watching her routines, learning when she was alone, and carefully planning his move. He often engaged her in conversation, telling harmless stories, offering small trinkets, and luring her trust with his grandfatherly demeanor.
Come here, my little girl. Today, I want to tell you an interesting story.
But beneath his polite smile, he was waiting. Then came the moment he had been waiting for. One afternoon, Fish lured Beatrice toward a secluded part of the farm under the pretense of showing her a special surprise. With each step, his heart raced, not with fear, but with sick anticipation. Just as he was about to strike, fate intervened. Beatrice's mother, sensing something was off, stepped outside and called for her daughter. The sound of her voice shattered Fish's plan. Panic gripped him as he realized he had been moments away from fulfilling his horrific fantasy. Without hesitation, he abandoned his plan and fled the scene, slipping away into the shadows. This failed attempt only made Fish more cautious. He realized that targeting children within the safety of their homes was too risky. From that moment on, he focused on vulnerable children, those who had no one to miss them, no one to come searching. Homeless, orphaned, and abandoned children became his new targets. The Beatrice Keel incident serves as a chilling reminder of how close Albert Fish came to claiming yet another innocent life. It was a rare moment where fate intervened, but many others would not be so lucky. The sinister tale of Albert Fish and Grace Budd, a crime that shook America. In 1928, Albert Fish, the infamous serial killer, committed one of the most horrifying and depraved crimes in history, the murder of 10-year-old Grace Budd. This case would ultimately lead to his capture and expose the true monster behind his frail, elderly facade. In May 1928, Albert Fish, then a 58-year-old man with a deceptively harmless appearance, stumbled upon a newspaper advertisement. The Budd family had placed the ad seeking employment for their son, Edward Budd. Fish, always on the hunt for his next victim, contacted the family under the alias Frank Howard, claiming to be a wealthy farmer in need of a strong young worker. Fish spun a convincing tale of a farm in the countryside, offering Edward a promising future. Desperate for work, the Budd family eagerly welcomed him into their home, unaware that they had just invited pure evil into their lives. With his soft-spoken demeanor and grandfatherly charm, Fish quickly gained the trust of the Budds. He promised to return in a week to take Edward to his so-called farm. However, his real interest shifted the moment he laid eyes on Grace Budd, Edward's innocent 10-year-old sister. Her youthful innocence and trusting nature made her the perfect prey. Fish embedded himself deeper into their lives, sharing fabricated stories about his farm and bringing small gifts for the children. The Budds, completely oblivious to his true intentions, saw him as a kind benefactor. With cunning manipulation, Fish made a sinister request. He asked if Grace could accompany him to a birthday party for his niece. Wanting their daughter to enjoy a special day, the Budds consented, unknowingly sealing her fate. On June 3, 1928, Grace Budd left her home, hand in hand with Albert Fish. She was dressed in her finest white dress, filled with excitement for the celebration that would never come. Instead of taking her to a party, Fish led her to an abandoned house in Westchester, New York, a place where unspeakable horrors awaited. Within the decaying walls of the empty house, Fish revealed his true nature. He brutally tortured the innocent girl before ending her life in the most grotesque manner imaginable. What followed was even more shocking. Fish, consumed by his twisted desires, dismembered Grace and later confessed to committing acts of cannibalism. For 6 long years, Grace's disappearance remained a mystery, and her grieving parents clung to a fading hope. Then, in 1934, a letter arrived at their doorstep, a letter so vile, so chilling, that it plunged them into unimaginable horror.
My dear Mrs. Budd, in 1894, a friend of mine shipped as a deckhand on the steamer Tacoma, capt. John Davis. They sailed from San Francisco for Hong Kong, China. On arriving there, he and 2 others went ashore and got drunk. When they returned, the boat was gone. At that time, there was famine in China. Meat of any kind was from $1 to $3 a pound. So great was the suffering among the very poor that all children under 12 were sold for food in order to keep others from starving. A boy or girl under 14 was not safe in the street. You could go in any shop and ask for steak chops or stew meat. Part of the naked body of a boy or girl would be brought out, and just what you wanted cut from it. A boy or girl's behind which is the sweetest part of the body, and sold as veal cutlet brought the highest price. John stayed sick there so long he acquired a taste for human flesh. On his return to NY, he stole 2 boys, one 7, one 11. Took them to his home, stripped them naked, tied them in a closet, then burned everything they had on. Several times every day and night he spanked them, tortured them to make their meat good and tender. First, he killed the 11-year-old boy because he had the fattest ass and, of course, the most meat on it. Every part of his body was cooked and eaten except the head, bones, and guts. He was roasted in the oven, all of his ass, boiled, broiled, fried, and stewed. The little boy was next, went the same way. At that time, I was living at 409E 100 Sate, near Rightside. He told me so often how good human flesh was, I made up my mind to taste it. On Sunday, June the 3/2/1928, I called on you at 406W to the 15. Saint brought you pot cheese strawberries. We had lunch. Grace sat in my lap and kissed me. I made up my mind to eat her, on the pretense of taking her to a party. You said yes, she could go. I took her to an empty house in Westchester I had already picked out. When we got there, I told her to remain outside. She picked wildflowers. I went upstairs and stripped all my clothes off. I knew if I did not, I would get her blood on them. When all was ready, I went to the window and called her. Then I hid in a closet until she was in the room. When she saw me all naked, she began to cry and tried to run down the stairs. I grabbed her, and she said she would tell her mama. First, I stripped her naked. How she did kick, bite, and scratch. I choked her to death, then cut her in small pieces so I could take my meat to my rooms, cook and eat it. How sweet and tender her little ass was roasted in the oven. It took me 9 days to eat her entire body. I did not fuck her, though I could have had I wished. She died a virgin.
In excruciating detail, Fish described what he had done to their daughter. He relished in the pain he inflicted, graphically recounting how he lured, tortured, and devoured Grace. The letter, however, contained a crucial clue, a small mistake that allowed investigators to trace it back to Fish. On December 16, 1934, police finally caught up with the monstrous killer in his New York City home. When confronted, Fish showed no remorse. In fact, he calmly confessed to his heinous acts, detailing his sadistic fantasies and admitting to numerous other crimes that sent chills down the spines of even the most hardened detectives. Albert Fish's trial in March 1935 captivated the nation. His defense argued insanity, citing his disturbing behaviors and obsession with self-inflicted pain. However, the jury saw through his facade and found him guilty of Grace Budd's murder, sentencing him to death. On January 16, 1936, Fish met his fate in the electric chair at Sing Sing Prison. Witnesses claimed he approached his execution with an eerie sense of eagerness, embracing death as if it were just another dark thrill. The murder of Grace Budd stands as one of the most horrifying crimes in American history, a grim reminder of the darkness that can hide behind the most unassuming faces. Albert Fish's monstrous legacy endures, serving as a cautionary tale of evil in its purest form. To understand Albert Fish is to peer into the abyss of human depravity. Diagnosed with severe psychopathy and a range of sexual disorders, Fish exhibited a disturbing blend of masochism and sadism. His early exposure to abuse and his obsession with self-inflicted pain-inserting needles into his own body, flogging himself with nail-studded paddles, were harbingers of the horrors he would later unleash upon others. Psychologists studying his case found his crimes rooted in a mix of religious fanaticism and deeply entrenched delusions. Fish believed he was fulfilling some divine command, often referencing biblical texts to justify his heinous acts. He derived pleasure from the pain of others, yet he also took comfort in his own suffering, creating a cycle of torment that fueled his monstrous impulses. Even after his capture and subsequent execution in 1936, the story of Albert Fish continues to haunt criminologists and true crime enthusiasts alike. His case remains a chilling reminder of how evil can wear the mask of innocence and how darkness can fester behind the most unassuming facades. Forensic psychologists still analyze his life, attempting to understand what drove such extreme behavior and whether similar patterns exist in modern serial offenders. His methods, his mind, and his monstrous deeds serve as a case study in pure, unrelenting horror. Albert Fish's story is not just one of murder. It is a testament to the terrifying depths of the human psyche. Thank you for daring to step into the darkness of Hunter Mind. But remember, the real nightmares have only just begun. Subscribe if you think you can escape the shadows that never sleep.